come we're doing the same stuff over and over and over to children. That's my question. What does it really take to change? You know, Murray Strauss's new book called Primordial Violence, which is about spanking, which is incredible. If any of you want to see the research on spanking, 90% of toddlers in the United States are spanked. And 1/3 of that 90% is spanked in the first year of life. Do babies make sense of that spanking? Do they have a narrative to help them heal from it? We don't call it trauma. We call it, that's what you have to do when a baby starts crawling and reaches up to touch something, right? You know, you smack them on the hands. I could imagine a world not only where all of you leave here trauma-informed, but you leave here committed and passionate about stopping spanking. Stopping spanking is the entrance for many people. It can happen before other violence happens. It happens while other violence is happening. It's an entranceway. And if we live in a society that totally accepts the norm of 90% of infants and toddlers being spanked, what's the hope of actually changing this world, to have a world where we can actually heal people and have a society that is based on that healing? So I know this isn't a conference on spanking, but it's predictable I'm going to turn it into that. Because I don't see how we're going to end and really be trauma-informed unless we start talking the truth. We've got to start talking the truth to DMH about its parenting programs. We have to resist and say, we will not teach the incredible years. Triple P parenting, what are some of these others? Back in control, you name them, tell me them. Have I missed any? What? What are they? Yeah? What do you teach? Come on, come out with them. But you all know what I'm talking about. We have to say we're not going to do it. And I love this quote that comes from the Reconceptualizing Early Childhood movement. Do you know there's a worldwide movement that is historically looking at how childhood has been framed, is looking critically at the work that has been the basis of our child development movement, Piaget, Kohlberg, you know, all those studies done on their own little boys, you know, what's his name? Oh, you know, 8 Stages of Man, what's his name? Erickson, you know, still taught as if they're gospel. What about the women's movement that developed out of Wellesley College, developed a theory of development that was relational? How come we don't hear that talked about? So interesting what you hear talked about and what you don't hear talked about. But listen, as we raise children, and we need to deconstruct what we know have been told is true, right? That we have to deconstruct what we have been told is true. We need to reflect on it, analyze it, criticize, and listen to this. Resist the seductive power arising from its familiarity. Did you hear that line? Resist the seductive power arising from its familiarity. It's familiar to us to put children in timeout. It's familiar to us to go to a place of consequences. Thank you for talking about consequences. I talk a lot just by shaking my head, so. And once we revisit, reverse what we know about how children think and learn, and about our approach we're going to use to help them to grow, then maybe I am ethically obliged to change what I actually do with them. Isn't that great? I am ethically obliged to do. Ethically obliged to do. To change what I do with them. Did you hear that information? Beautiful. We can't sit here and leave today and go back and do business as usual. We can't go back and be talking that children are acting up. We can't go back and not be an ally to children. That's who we are. Unfortunately, the system out there, the dominant paradigm system, will not ethically speak up, will it? We have to be the people that ethically speak up. That's a scary role to put ourselves in. It's scary to work in DMH and say, I'm going to resist. I ethically have to resist. It's scary to be a teacher. It's bad enough being a teacher. I mean, it's hard enough being a teacher. It's scary to be a teacher who resists. Right? Those classrooms where teachers are resisting are not classrooms where children are sitting passively in their seats. Those are classrooms where there's dynamics happening, where children are seen as individuals, where children who have traumatic induced behaviors are not sent to a detention room with nothing on the walls, made to turn their tables so they're looking at the blank space and sit there for hours. What happens to the heart of us, our own personal hearts? What happens to our own personal hearts when we don't ethically resist? What happens to us? We get re-victimized. We get re-traumatized. We get traumatized. Maybe we didn't have these things in our childhood. You work in these systems, you become a victim of trauma. Right? So teachers, we have to resist. We have to be in the bank and speak up. Scary. My God. You want a torturous air flight? 15 hours in a plane with a dominant paradigm family sitting in front of you. Oh my God. Every piece of my adrenaline system was pumping. I couldn't get out. I was stuck. I felt sick for those children. I felt physically sick. Don't you feel physically sick when you see what happens to children out in this world? I do every day. My daughter tells me I'm unsafe to go anywhere. She holds me back. No, Mom, no. assumption that everybody has been traumatized. That's the assumption I work from. I'm not looking for the ones of the gory details, you know, the child abuse horror stories. That's not what nonviolent parenting is about. Nonviolent parenting is about everyday parenting. 90% of us who are parenting, I'm believing, probably higher, and 90% of us parenting from this unhealed lens. Maybe not that high. Maybe there's more of us who are healing now. We got to take this healing out of therapists' offices. You know? Let's reduce the power of therapists to be the healing agents of this world. Because that's a bloody privilege to have the bucks to go to therapy, isn't it, in this society? And if you're lucky to go to a community health clinic and get a therapist, there, and this is without disrespect for interns, because that's where we all started, but they're gone after a while, and you've got an attachment challenged issue, and you just are pouring your heart out to this intern, oh, and she's left. So that system, I know it, and deepest respect to those of you who are getting your hours and interns. I see you, Ian. But I want to see healing taking place wherever we can take place, because to change this paradigm, to be trauma-informed care, clear, we all have the power to heal each other. And part of what we're ethically obliged to do when we have this information is to take on the role of being a healer. You don't need to know all her language. We don't I mean, it was great, and I felt you were very accessible, so I'm not saying, but do you know what I'm talking about? We can do it, because this is a heart-to-heart process. And this thing of empathy, oh my God, isn't it a buzzword now? I mean, since Obama talked about empathy, everybody's talking about empathy, but 90% of what people are doing as empathy is not empathy. I'm so empathetic. And what people are doing is not empathetic. And you know why? Because we can't truly be empathetic unless we're emotionally intelligent. And what's stolen from us in this mass trauma society is an emotional intelligence. Because we have a phobia of them. Oh my God, New Zealand is the best place for them. How are you? Well, I'm good, really. No. I remember on a bus, I have great journeys on transportation. On this bus, this poor woman was telling me how she had no heat in New Zealand in the winter. But I'm all right, really. So if you grow up with that, you don't grow up with much emotional intelligence. So if we're going to do this, if we're going to ethically take on this responsibility, what do we have to do? We have to start with ourselves. We've got to, you've got to read the work of Carla McLaren. You know her? Wrote a wonderful book on emotions and the art of empathy. Did you hear the word, what she calls it? The art of empathy. And she talks about so clearly that it has to begin with our own emotional, what's the word, expansion? Being able to, and we can't do it unless we do the grief work along with it, right? So, and then we need to talk to our friends and turn everybody into healers around us so we can have the courage to have these healing dialogues. These are not therapy dialogues. These are not therapeutic dialogues. These are healing dialogues that we all have to embrace if we're going to actually make a dent in this trauma-informed world. Do you believe that? I totally believe it. So I want to talk about, and I want you to raise some. Oh, I want to talk before, this other buzzword that's being talked about everywhere now. Resilience. Empathy and resilience. My concern about resilience is that mostly what people are talking about is adaptation. It's not really talking about true resilience. It's being adapted at a compromise to your heart, but being adapted so you can go on and manage the world. So I want us to be careful and make the distinction between true resilience and adaptation. Resilience is part of the healing construct, isn't it? Resilience takes guts. It takes guts to become resilient. It takes guts to go into the pain, to look at it, to work through it, to own those that you've hurt, to go back and make amends to those that you've hurt. That's to learn new coping strategies for stress. That, to me, is true resilience. And I tell you, I totally hear you. My children are the same age of yours. My God, a day doesn't go by, does it? You know, and now they've taught they're taught their children. So, Grandma, I don't think that was nonviolent, Grandma. Right. It's a big journey to be accountable, isn't it? Right. Yes, Mum, but you talk too darn much about those feelings, Mum. Oh. Wouldn't have it any other way, but it opens up a new world. So be careful when you use this word resilience. Please be careful when you use this word empathy. Are you really being empathetic? Are you really looking at resilience in a healing way? So what I hear about nonviolent parenting for a lot of people is that the dominant paradigm strategies work. Have you heard that? They work. This nonviolent parenting stuff, this processing of feelings, this empathy-based approach, doesn't work the same way. I bet there's some of you in this room who've felt that. Are there? Yeah, takes a lot to actually be willing to let go of the pre-formed consequences of interactions and to give children equal power. Now, don't be frightened about what I'm saying. Equal power in our support of their emotional intelligence and healing. What happens is you can have your feelings as long as they match mine. You know what I'm saying? No, that's what I mean. You know what I'm saying? You can have your feelings as long as you're sort of succumbing to the view that you've been bad. Right? You know what I'm saying about that? So I want you to think about this word, what works. Think about in your adult relationships. Do you judge what works with your partners or your friends by their immediate change of their behavior? Does that work? Does that make a healthy adult relationship? I've gone and got some strategies about what works. So I'm going to bring them home with my partner, and I'm going to do what works with my partner. Does that build your relationship? You would think that person was crazy. What works in an adult relationship is an ever-involving, growing, right, dynamic or dance of intimacy and knowing and growth. Why don't we have the same criteria for children? Why do we enter in these discussions about what's going to work? We don't want what works. We want what grows healthy people. We want what heals people, what grows people to heal. This child's acting out. What? We've got to stop this language. Nobody, well, my partner acts out all the time. Does that help build your intimate connection, that you call them they're acting out? Probably not. So have you tried hiding your partner's favorite shoes? Does it work? Have you found it works? We laugh. We laugh. But that's the gist of a lot of people's parenting. And what about this thing of consequences? Yeah, okay, that's okay. I go this far, Ruth, but I just can't accept that you don't have to have consequences. Most books tell you that consequences and time out are actually positive parenting, don't they? I'm allergic to this word, positive parenting. There's nothing positive about it. It's a respectful parenting. Look beyond those words, just like you have to look beyond nonviolent parenting. People wanted to change nonviolent parenting. Do you remember Deanna? Oh, you can't use that word nonviolence, Ruth. That's going to turn people away. I'm adamant that it's nonviolent. I'm adamant that nonviolence means honoring the life force of each and every human being. And those of you who are animal lovers, yes, animals, Mother Earth. Positive. So I won't go down that road. So I'm adamant that we embrace this word nonviolence. And yes, I know Gandhi wasn't great with his children. I know Martin Luther King wasn't good with his children either. Somebody threw that in my face the other day. Do you really know about Gandhi as a father? Do you really know about Martin Luther King as a father? So I could get derailed by that. But I'm going to hold that this word nonviolence is actually what has to happen to make this a decent society. That will end war. It's what will end trauma. Do you like living in a society with 1 out of every 3 little girls is sexually abused before she's 18? 1 of 8 little boys? We're in this room. %50 of marriages have violence. %90 of toddlers are spanked. What other word can we use to change society but nonviolence? Not non-violence, nonviolence. Can you all do that? Nonviolence. Do that with me. Nonviolence. Yeah. It's more than the absence of violence. It's more than the absence of violence. It's this deep, honoring respect. What society needs it more than a society where 90% of people are traumatized? What society needs it more? What else bothers people about nonviolence? Throw out those other words that bother you. What? Permissive. Yeah, people like to say, I don't want to be permissive. I love it when people say, I hear this sometimes, oh my God, you should see those children that come, their parents go to echo parenting. You should see those children. People, that's an interesting thing to hear. Because children of parents who are actually raising them nonviolently are different from children who are raised in the dominant paradigm. They actually have a voice. They actually tell you what they don't like. They actually talk to teachers and say, I don't like this. Oh my God. Stand up. See this woman here? This is Deanna. Come up here. I want you. She doesn't like when I do this, and it's probably not trauma-informed. But it's based on love and respect. Will you tell them the story?
The detention one?
Just tell them that story and what your daughter did.
So, I think I told someone today, my daughter Janine, who's 17, last week they're starting to implement in her school detention. So every time you're late 3 days in a row, then you get an hour of detention. And so she was really upset. They told her you have to sit in detention 1 hour and write about it. And so my daughter Janine said, I want to do my homework, and they said, no, you have to write about detention. And so she wrote, and I could have brought the letter. She wrote this letter that talked exactly what was going on in the room. And so she said, I'm sitting here writing this letter about detention, and I can see that the counselor is telling Michael, and I remember it was Michael, sit down, be quiet. And I'm thinking, what is she doing? Does she not know that the teenage brain, she was saying, that the teenage brain, if you tell a teenager, don't do that, that's exactly what they're going to do. And so I'm coming to this school because I thought this school was a school that was different. I thought that this school was more nonviolent. And so it was beautiful for me to see her read this story and really talk about her experience. And she was her adrenaline. She says, and I didn't give this paper because I want to make sure that the principal reads this paper, because I don't want to leave this school thinking, having these images of what happens at this school. So it was a really powerful letter. It was it was really powerful to see my daughter have a voice, and it's hard to have my daughter have a voice when I want to have power. but it's beautiful to watch her grow in this philosophy and in this practice.
Beautiful. That only happens because she's done how many years of it now? 21 years of this work. Isn't that a beautiful story? And I think that brings to a part of this that I think we don't talk about enough. We don't talk enough about how to use this, how to actually empower children with this knowledge. We talk about it as a parenting approach. It's not. It's actually, we want children to grow up, to know this. You know what I'm saying? We don't want to do anything to our children that we can't turn it into a teachable moment. And then, of course, we're not doing anything to them, we're doing things with them. right? We're doing it with them. So if we're pissed off, if our amygdala, da-da-da-da-da, all the beautiful things you said, if we get to that place of disconnection, that we actually can own our brain. I like people to go up to our heads and take out our own brains and look at them. Because if we can get familiar with our own brain, if we can get familiar with what's in there, what's been wired into our brain, what pain and hurt and trauma, then actually we can give our children a chance to actually grow up knowing what's happening in their own brain. So that's what I love about that story. That's an empowered young woman, isn't it? To go to school and say, you don't know about adolescent brain? And she's 17? Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? All right. What else don't you know about nonviolent parenting? What else do you hear? Really good for those people. Who are those? I don't need that. Who are those people? People that hit kids. That's a nice cop-out, isn't it? Yeah. That's a very important one. Did you hear that? They have to live in the real world. Make the real world nonviolent, right. Make the real world trauma sensitive, trauma informed. I don't know about making the children live in this dominant paradigm violent world. Is that really what we have to do? Don't we have to seek, I love that term, seeking safety. Though I know that's not what that means here, but I'm going to take those words. But, creating spaces where children can seek safety, where children actually can come home. Yes, schools may be this way, but they come home to people who open their arms to them, attune to them, have them tell me what happened today. I'm not going to shame you. I want to hear what happened. Some people define that as a report card. I want to see your grades. Be away with these bloody grades. Why do we accept it? Why do we accept that that's the definition of a person, is their grades? I see you. You don't have to hold it back.
I'm enjoying it. And I knew it too.
I wish we could sit here and have just sit here and think this was a requiem for the dying of the dominant paradigm. We're the privileged ones sitting in this room, aren't we? What are the action steps every one of you are going to take to build this movement? I got 2 more minutes to rant. And probably this is not what they meant by a keynote speech. But I could cry for you with the next 2 minutes. one of these kids. I'm 70, and I'm still working through it. And I came from a psychologist family. Wasn't meant to happen in families like me. So let's not talk about those other people. That's another thing we like to do. It's those other people. Go home today and make amends to repair the rupture with somebody that you know you have hurt. If you learned today that that was a pattern from your early trauma, a coping strategy, go home and share that. I know a lot of you in this room have done nonviolent parenting training. But this is a movement for everybody. It's not just for people who've been trained. Oh, they'll come and get trained. That's a great thing to do. But just imagine taking this to the streets, into the supermarkets, into the bank, wherever we are. Oh, great. How many of you go with your children to parks? Oh, that's a great playground for nonviolent parenting. Let's make this word trauma. Let's take the fear out of it. And let's talk how this is something I've had, most of us had. Share that with people. Open up the dialogue. That's what will shift. So my time's up. So, all I can do is just like, onward. Onward.